One, two. Hello. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Michael Essick live stream. It is 3 p.m. in the UK. Today, we're going to talk about how to ride trends like a pro. So, thank you for joining me. I think we are all good here. Rusty is in the house. Algerian Eagle is here. Neil is here. Mutant Chisel from Seattle. Cliff is here. Grey Elephant Club. Soul Visible Vivian. Eddie. I assume I'm all good to go. Had a little bit technical issues a few minutes ago with the camera cutting out. So if that happens, I'm just preempting. If that happens, just bear with and I'll reboot my camera. Sound should stay throughout. But if the camera disappears, yeah, just bear with and I'll reboot it. Okay, Nicole is here. Peter is here from Sydney. And Giorgio, Code Whisperer, Teresa, and Gary. Awesome. Thank you all for joining me on this somewhat cloudy but nice and warm day here in the UK. I have an interesting topic today. So I think many of you, or you should be on my email newsletter list, you will have received an email from me earlier this week. And I shared a little bit about what I'm going to talk about here, which is about riding trends and what it takes to be successful, on trends and on trending topics and viral topics. So I'm going to expand on that today. I asked you guys on the email list, do you want to do a usual design review or would you like me to talk about this? By far, more people wanted me to talk about this than to do our usual design review. So that's what we're going to do today. So hello to you, Top Gun Movies. Mickey is here. Glenda is here. One Mind, One Love. Ben Shrimpton and Andrea. Great. So without further ado, let's get it cracking here today. I might just move that a little bit. There we go. So please do like and subscribe if you have not already. That would be really helpful. The slides for today. So I have put together some slides with some flowcharts, some diagrams, some bits and pieces, some examples. I imagine that we are gonna have people asking for those throughout the live, so that's fine. Of course, not everyone's going to be watching this intro, but you can sign up and download the slides at michaelessick.com/live. There. michaelessick.com/live. If you go there, sign up. You land on a resources page, scroll right to the bottom, you'll find the PDF, including these slides that we're going to get into today. As usual, please do ask questions as we go through. I think this will be an interesting topic, quite meaty. There's a lot to talk about. So I think there'll be a lot of questions. So feel free to ask them and I will intermittently be checking the comments and taking questions. Do stay till the end if you want to find out how you can win a copy of my book, The Little Book of T-Shirt Ideas. I have one here. This could be yours. And this week, the winner, or last week, I should say, the winner was CG. That's all I have for a name, CG. So if you are CG, please do message me and I will get your book out to you. Okay. We had Eileen, we got Dave here as well, Manash, Nicholas, David. Good afternoon to you all, or morning, or wherever you're watching from. It's lovely to have you, and I hope you get something out of this session today. So, should we get into it? I don't see any reason why not. Seven Cogs is here as well. So let's dive right into it. We'll see how we go. Yeah, a couple of warnings, I think, first. So, maybe give a little bit of background actually before I dive in. Last week there was a but there was a news story that happened last week, and as I was just browsing through Twitter and Instagram and stuff, I noticed a few jokes developing around this thing, and it just kind of fit the pattern of what I would describe as a kind of trending topic that I would usually hop on and make designs for. Now, what I did was I started, as I usually do, I pulled out my phone, I started taking some notes and some ideas for potential designs and some jokes and things that I could do designs around. But instead of actually turning them into designs, I thought instead of doing that, this would make a really good case study for the actual process of brainstorming and coming up with ideas for trends and everything that goes into that. So instead of creating any designs, what I've done is basically tried my best to document the whole process, because I basically sat down with my phone. I just started, hammering out ideas, and then I stopped and started kind of analyzing what I was doing, which was really interesting. And I think hopefully it's going to be helpful and interesting for you too. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to go through that whole process in this session today. And of course, you can get the slides, michaellessick.com/live. Not there, but there. So yeah, you can get the slides there and follow along. Or obviously the slides will be on the screen. I'll make these a little bit bigger here so it makes a bit more sense. So where to begin? Let's start here. So I think I kind of mentioned this in my email earlier this week, but trends are a funny place to play. They are, when I say trend, that can mean anything from, Halloween all the way through down to like some really sub-niche little mini trend or a viral trend that happens for a few days and then it disappears. So there's a few warnings around trends that I want to first kind of give as a big caveat to everything that's going to follow. So number one is there's an 80-20 rule at least going on here, which is that, as I said in my email earlier this week, if you create maybe 10 designs around different individual trends, maybe you'll be right about 2 of them. You'll probably be wrong about 8 of them, something like that. So this usually doesn't land. I've created lots of designs around things that I thought were going to be trends, and they turned out not to be trends. So this is a bit about trend prediction. This is a bit about kind of anticipating where things might go, and that is a inherently dangerous business, and it often means that you're wrong about things, which is fine. Of course, we're kind of prepared for that, but it's still that I just want to kind of give that warning up front. Next up, don't do nothing but this. So don't dedicate yourself to doing only trend-based designs. That's a very dangerous place to play in, because you'll have a very weird and out-of-date portfolio a year from now or whatever, because you'll have all these designs about trends or trends that you thought were about to take off but never did, and you'll have old designs all over the place. So what you don't want to do is spend all your time chasing trends. You want to have a nice rounded portfolio, lots of evergreen designs, ideally things about particular markets and subjects you know about and are interested in, and people you can market to, things like that. So yeah, and this session here is going to be a little bit nerdy. There's going to be diagrams, there's going to be stuff like that. It's not something I've really taught before, so this is a kind of first go round on this. So do bear that in mind. But with all that said, there are some upsides to trends. Like if you do get it right, there can be a lot of fun, a lot of sales, especially as the trend kind of spikes. And if you're there as it spikes, if you're there before it spikes, if you're right at the top of the mountain, then you stand to benefit quite a lot when that does happen. So it can be very fun if you get ahead of a trend. And trend riding works for designs. So obviously I'm kind of talking principally about trends when it comes to t-shirt designs, and that means most of us selling designs on print on demand sites or something like that. But it also works for marketing, for social media. And this is a skill and this is a technique also that can be applied to almost any viral story or topic or joke. So it's not that this only applies to silly stories or viral stories or something like that. This can also be applied to your marketing, for your social media, for your Instagram posts and stuff like that. So don't just think of this as, oh, he's just talking about creating t-shirt designs. This can be a lot more than that. It can be different products. It can be for your marketing. So there's all sorts of ways in which this applies. Okay. And finally, there are trends. I was going to say there are trends within communities, by which I meant, don't necessarily think of trends as, oh, these are only things that blow up and get huge and all the world is talking about it. There are also trends that happen within sub-niches and little mini markets and mini communities. And in fact, really, I corrected myself. I said there are only trends within communities, because trends can only happen within a community. Even if, the biggest story of whatever we think, the biggest story in the world right now, something like coronavirus, there will be a tribe somewhere in the Amazon that doesn't know about coronavirus. And to them, it's not a story, it's not a trend, it's not a topic they have any reference for. So wherever there's a market, wherever there's a community, wherever there's people interested in something, there will always be trends coming and going, certain interest in certain things. And I'll share plenty of examples of that as we go through this session today. Let me just say hi to a few more people who've joined us. Craig is here. Ron is here. Louise is here. Jennifer from LA. Enna and Chota. And Melinda and Walrus Industries from New York City. All right, cool. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of this. So here's a picture of a guy surfing and some surfers in the ocean. Now, I don't know much about surfing. I've never really actually done it. But I do know a little bit about what happens when you're surfing. And this is a good analogy, I think, for trends. So if you're a surfer, as I understand it, your job is to look at the waves that are coming in and then position yourself to be ready for that wave when it hits, and then to actually get on that wave as it hits and ride it down. And that's kind of what we're talking about. We want to ride a trend in much the same way. And there's a couple of analogies here. For example, number one is that there are always new trends coming in. So even if you miss this one or you miss the next one, there's always going to be another wave coming. You know, that's the nature of the tide, and that's the nature of culture and things like that. Another thing is if you see this guy here, you know, riding the wave, that is and you were down here, that's a pretty good indication that you've missed that wave, and this is not a useful trend for you to hop on. If someone's already riding it, if it's already, you know, if the crest of the wave has hit and it's already curling, you have missed that particular trend. So that's just I think that's a good analogy to say that we don't want to be hopping on things that have already peaked. And you probably be able to spot that because those designs will be bestsellers or something like that. It will be obvious. It's obvious that this wave has peaked, because if it hadn't, this guy wouldn't be riding it and you wouldn't see all the white foam and everything like that. So that's a wave. And then I found this little diagram about how waves kind of develop, and they kind of start off as little waves, and then they increase in height, and then they finally peak, and then they wash up on the shore. And that's a lot like what we're talking about here. You know, trends come and go, they peak, they reach their height, and then they kind of quickly dive off. And I'll show you my own example of that in a second here. And to give you some example of what I mean by trends, like I said earlier, trends can mean everything from, you know, massive trends everyone knows about, like coronavirus or something like that, all the way down to like minuscule little in-jokes for little communities that, you know, take off. I think if I could give it a broad definition, it would be something like trends are like natural waves of culture, and we can just kind of predict them and ride them. And usually we can do that through organic traffic, meaning we don't have to, you know, we don't have to necessarily market stuff. We can ride natural organic traffic, meaning people going online searching for funny coronavirus t-shirt or something like that. So some examples of trends, and not particularly trends, but kind of topics that can become trends. Things like, and these are not given as things you should do designs around, this is just examples of different trends. So like a celebrity death becomes a trend, an example of a trend that you should stay well away from when creating designs. Not least because there is usually, whenever a celebrity dies, there's a big outpouring of grief. There's a lot of interest. A lot of people want to buy things around it. But of course, it's questionable morally. It's also against a lot of sites' policies to do something like that. But then very shortly after that, the interest dies down and people are not really interested in that anymore. Things like political movements, whether that's around election times, or it could be wider political movements, something like Black Lives Matter, or maybe environmental movements. Those kind of things, they are trends that come and rise, and then after a while they disappear again. But that's another good example of something. Slang terms and sayings, things like okay boomer, or whatever it might be, whatever the funny saying is of this particular month or whatever. Those are good examples of trends. Cultural controversies, whether that's, you know, stories, it could be kind of political, or it could be just wider cultural things, moral issues, or things like that. The kind of things you read about every day in the online, or, you know, on Twitter and stuff like that. TVs, movies, media, popular diets, memes are good examples of trends. Sports trends, so whenever a big sporting event is happening or something. A scientific discovery can be a good example of a trend, or we saw something like the eclipse, which happened a few years ago. That was a massive trend that a lot of people were able to hop on. Different hobbies can be trending from time to time. You know, certain people take up a new hobby, whether it's jogging or cycling or whatever it might be. And there can be a joke that just becomes a trend that people share, or a location, like a particular country might go through a trend of being particularly popular, or even a city. People might be moving out of one city and all moving into another city. There's aesthetic trends. So people looking for certain visual things to wear because there's an aesthetic style that they want to be associated with, or technological trends like the new iPhone or whatever, the new kind of particular technology, whatever it might be. So that's some examples to kind of get you in the right kind of frame of mind. Let's have a look at how trends develop. So this is my summary of how I think things kind of happen, and I'll give you examples in a second. But trends start with some kind of story. There's something that kind of usually sparks things off. That's particularly the case with the example I'm going to dive into in a bit here. There was a particular news story, and around that news story, they then developed some jokes. So what happened was there was obviously something about the story that had some kind of humorous element in it, and that led to quite a lot of jokes. Now, that's not the case often with, if you have a tragedy that happens or something, or a celebrity death, you don't usually find a lot of jokes coming after things like that. So that's a good example right from the start here of how, when you're looking at trends, what you want to do is you want to filter out, potential trends from useless trends. You want to filter out all the ones that are not going to be useful, and you want to focus on things that are going to be useful. One good useful indicator is that there are jokes developing around this particular story. And those can be on Twitter, Instagram, whatever it might be. You'll see jokes beginning to surface. And then somewhere after that, if the trend is ever going to hit, you will then usually begin to see an uptick in sales. So a few weeks ago, on a completely different subject, I created some designs around what I thought was a developing trend. And it took a few weeks, but this week those designs have started to sell, and to sell quite well. So I was pretty good, I think, at predicting that particular one, and I've started to see some sales. Now, what I expect to then happen is it's going to reach a peak at some point, and then it's going to dip down. And then once it's peaked, of course, down here, you don't really want to be creating designs or anything around this trend, because the sales have peaked. It's all going to die off. It's probably going to trickle down, and that's the end of it. So that's the kind of life cycle of a trend. So here's what we're going to do in this session. We're going to show exactly how to ride trends. And there's three main things we're going to do. Number one, we're going to analyze potential trends. So we're going to have a look at how to filter out good trends from bad trends. We're going to look at how to identify the humor in a trend. So this is going to be especially applicable to stories, viral news stories, or jokes, cultural jokes, memes, things like that, where there's some humor elements. And then finally, we're going to look at turning that into a design. So you can look at this as a three-part framework. 1, 2, 3, we're going to analyze, then identify the joke, then we're going to turn it into a t-shirt design in particular. We're not going to do any designing in this session, but I'm going to show you how you might turn it into a good idea for a t-shirt. So tracking with me so far? Okay. First off, let's look at the first thing we had there, analyzing potential trends. So here's what to look for: a legitimate trend, a trend that you should pay attention to, that you might want to create designs around. It's going to have the following characteristics. Number one, it's going to have some sales potential. So what I mean by that is it's something that people, you can imagine, will go online and search for this or things related to this trend because they want it on products, or they want to wear it, or something like that. Now, that can be, there's a few ways or reasons people might want to buy something, and I've listed out a few examples here. This is by no means exhaustive, but for example, if there's a story or a trend that inspires identification in some way. So, for example, something like a political trend, a trend towards Joe Biden t-shirts, inspires people to identify as a supporter of Joe Biden for the sake of the election. So they want to be associated, identified as part of that tribe, or as voting for a particular person. So that kind of thing is going to inspire sales potential. So if you knew, like we all know now, that Joe Biden's going to be the nominee against Trump, then you know that people are going to be supporting him. You know that people are going to want to buy t-shirts for him. And you can see that trend. That's an obvious trend that almost everyone can see, but we all know what's coming from that. So that's one example. Another one is if there's a strong joke. So example, and the kind of thing we'll talk about here in a second, is this kind of thing. So when you have a really strong joke that culturally people find quite funny, and that that reveals itself in jokes on Twitter, on Instagram, on TV panel shows, whatever it might be. When you see those things, you can see that there's a strong joke, there's a strong kind of big joke that everyone likes talking about. An example of that might be something like, oh, Donald Trump is stupid or something like that. That's a big joke. Everyone shares it. Everyone talks about it in the media, and develops into this big thing. And then another example is if you can find multiple layers of meaning around a trend. So if there is a subtext of something, then that can be something that really inspires sales potential, inspires people to want to buy something. So a trend with only one layer of meaning probably means, it's not necessarily going to be that strong. But if you can find multiple levels, or you can identify it as even a trend within a trend, for example, you could say something like the Extinction Rebellion thing, the Extinction Rebellion group. They are a sub-trend, if you like, of a wider environmentalism trend. So there's kind of multiple levels of stuff going on there. Another way or another feature of legitimate trends, what you want to look out for, you don't want any obvious roadblocks or obstacles that would prevent it from being something you could create designs around. So, for example, trademark and IP issues are a big one. So obviously you cannot do designs around movies or TV shows, even those are going to be really big trends. Whenever there's the latest TV show, Mandalorian or Stranger Things or whatever it might be, you're not going to be able to create designs around that, even though it's a massive trend that loads of people are going to be interested in. Another example of trademark or IP issues can be things like if there's a trend that relies on certain words that are trademarked already, maybe it's a brand name or something. For example, if everyone suddenly tomorrow started referring to a particular joke using the word Gucci or something, so everything was Gucci, then that would be an issue because it's a trademark, so you won't be able to create designs around that or use that term in your designs. So that's another obvious obstacle. Another one which I shared in my email earlier this week, there can be confusion over terms. So if you have a misspelling or something and you put that into Google or Amazon and it can't find a lot of results for that, it might say, did you mean this instead of this? And that can prevent designs being found in the first place. So that's something to look out for. And you could also have a situation where there's existing competition for terms. So for example, if there was a sudden trend around, I don't know, let's say the word birthday suddenly took on a new meaning and was transformed into this new meaning, which didn't mean birthday as we currently know it, but it took on a new meaning and it was some trend, then that would be very difficult to do designs around, because if you search birthday t-shirt, there's lots of t-shirts that already exist. So it's going to be hard for your designs to be found in and amongst all that competition. So those are a few things to kind of look out for on legitimate trends. Other big things like, of course, staying away from anything that would be morally questionable, celebrity deaths, tragedies, things like that. But I'm taking those as being pretty obvious for most of us. So I'll take a little breather here. I don't think, if there's any questions, you can fire away before we get into the example that I'm going to share. But I don't think there are. Just a few people joining us. We have Victor from London, Scotty and John, Sarah, Nuna, Wendy, and YT. Good to have you all here. Okay, so today's example. So this is the example that last week I was sat on my sofa. There was a news story on the TV. I was looking at Twitter. I was seeing jokes beginning around this thing, and I thought it's the kind of thing that I would usually create designs and ideas around. So I would document the whole process. So I wondered if anyone wanted to have a stab at what this particular story is, and maybe give a couple of minutes here and see if anyone's got any ideas of what it is. What do you think that story could be? So it's a story that happened last week, or it certainly kind of broke last week, or this particular aspect of it broke. And I'll try and give you a few hints. I think it was the 9th of September that I actually made my notes, started my note in Evernote, made a note of this thing. So it was the 9th of September last week. It's a potentially unfunny, I shouldn't say unfunny. It could be perceived as quite offensive to do designs around this. It could even be classified as human tragedy. But it's something that, hey, look, first person in with a comment has got it off the marks. Well done, Joan. Was it the gender reveal event? It was indeed. So created 9th of September. This was my note. Gender reveal case study last week. So last week, I think it was on the 8th or something. This was the story. A California fire sparked by a gender reveal party has grown to more than 10,000 acres. So I noticed this story, I think it was actually probably around this time last week or maybe a day or two before. And what followed shortly thereafter, or what I saw on Twitter, were a lot of examples of tweets like, if we just have a quick look at here. So this would be, in terms of the development of the trend, this would be the story happening last week. So the story being that one of the fires in California was sparked by a gender reveal party. Now, obviously, the fires in California are not funny. Lots of people have lost homes and people have died. It's not the fire itself is not a funny thing. The story here is the gender reveal element to it, which, as we'll find out shortly, brings a different kind of color to everything. So this was the story that kind of broke here. And then shortly thereafter, or around the same time, almost in real time, because that's what happens these days, certain jokes started developing. So here's some examples of some tweets I found. These are not the tweets or the examples that I saw, but very similar to kind of what I was seeing online. So, for example, this one says, a gender reveal, except you announced that you're getting a puppy instead of burning down the state of California. Sorry about my gender reveal oil spill. I wanted it to be memorable. So people are making a joke and they're being sarcastic. The first plague of Egypt was a gender reveal party. And pretty slowly, slowly to my mind, but you can see what happens is people are already beginning to identify the humor in this story and to kind of reveal that humor in lots of different ways and in lots of different jokes. This one's quite telling. You can ignore the bit about straight culture, but straight culture is throwing a gender reveal party that sparks 47-acre wildfire and causing $8 million in damages. And this is kind of what we have to kind of focus in on. So let's go back to last week. There's been this story. I'm seeing these tweets and I'm seeing these kind of jokes. And then I think around the same time, they began to develop some memes, as often happens as well. So here's some examples of the memes that started doing the rounds. Things like America's be like, it's a boy with a big atomic explosion, or it's a boy instead of this is fine. Just hanging out with my friend's gender reveal party and leaving your gender reveal party like this, and so on and so forth. So pretty soon after any kind of story breaks, you'll see lots of jokes and memes and stuff like this. So here's the big question is, how do we go from story to jokes to memes, and how do we then turn that into particular design or something? How do we, because none of these are even memes, which kind of are closer to t-shirt designs in many ways. These are not t-shirt designs. They're not, obviously I didn't create them, so I'm not going to create a t-shirt design out of these, but these are not t-shirt designs anyway. They don't lend themselves to t-shirt design. So we need to reinterpret this whole story, this whole joke, this whole topic into a kind of t-shirt design framework. This was actually just yesterday. I just thought I'd throw this in there. Drew Gooden just yesterday posted this video about the whole topic. So this is an example of how, we've got a pretty good, we're following this framework pretty well here. We've had the story, we're seeing some jokes, and we're kind of, I would say we're kind of here on the cusp of potential sales around this, if we're not already there. I haven't really done much research into the trend on different sites, but yeah, this just goes to show that I think we're seeing jokes and ideas and things being shared about it. It's becoming culturally relevant, and people are, thinking about it. So let's ask ourselves these questions about this. Does this trend in particular, does it have sales potential? Well, does it inspire identification? Not necessarily, not really. It's not really about that. It's more of this one here, I would say. It's more of a strong joke. This is a story that has a big kind of joke element to it. And we'll dive into that in a second. And because of that, I think it does have sales potential. Now, go back to what we said right at the start of this, which is we don't, we know that, not 8 out of 10 such designs around trends, or 8 out of 10 attempts to predict a trend are going to fall flat. So we're prepared for that. We know that this might not be a trend. It might not materialize. It might materialize into some kind of trend, but doesn't really have sales potential. But we're baking that in from the start. We know that's the case. So let's go with it. Let's give this one a tick for strong joke. Let's say that it does have some sales potential. Are there any obvious roadblocks or obstacles? Are there any trademark or IP issues? Well, no, thankfully. There are no trademark or IP issues around this particular story or trend or viral, topic. Are there potential confusion over terms? There is potential there. For example, if you do a search for like gender reveal t-shirt, you're going to find a lot of t-shirts around gender reveal parties. You're not going to find jokes about a gender reveal party starting a fire. So there is potential confusion there. So that's something we might want to give a warning sign around it. But let's leave it to one side for the moment. Existing competition for terms. Yeah, again, like I just said, the gender reveal thing could cause us issues. But let's ignore those for now, even though you might actually want to scratch this trend out based on those. In another situation, but let's ignore those for now and let's kind of proceed and say, well, we think it's pretty funny, so maybe it's worth creating some designs around. So if we go back to our how to ride trend, so we've analyzed the potential trend. The next thing we want to do is identify the humor in this particular thing. So here's a couple of pointers on identifying the humor. Let me take a couple of comments on this actually. Let's see here. Melinda says it happened near her, but she's not offended by any jokes. That's good. Obviously, the intention here is not to offend anyone. I'm not trying to be funny or anything. Just trying to show you a process of how to go through this and come up with some ideas. Merch Papa says it's parents telling their friends if they get a boy or a girl. Yeah, so if you don't know what a gender reveal party is, it's when parents have a party to celebrate a pregnancy or a child that's incoming, that's imminent, and they're going to reveal the gender. So they're going to reveal whether it's a boy or a girl. And I think the parents don't know, so they usually have some kind of way of finding out, whether there's like a balloon or something like that, and then it's a surprise to everyone at the party and to the parents. And I guess that's how it works. It's not an English thing at all. Okay, Reza says, I think he's talking to someone in the thing. Walrus says, would you just search in Twitter for gender reveal? Yeah, if you're looking for tweets or something like that, then yeah, you could do that. Okay, so let's talk about identifying the joke. So a couple of tips here. I would start with existing jokes and analyze them. So I gave some examples earlier. Where are they? So like here we've got tweets and stuff. So this is kind of what I did. I looked at tweets, I looked at memes, and I started trying to analyze what the joke was. So looking at existing jokes, looking at what's already there. And a joke has to have an audience who gets it. Now, if you're already seeing tweets and Instagram posts and they're getting lots of likes and lots of shares and responses and comments, that usually implies that a joke or something is funny and that people are getting it and people are responding to it. So that's another plus sign as well. And then you need to be able to break it down into the conflicting elements. So this should be pretty straightforward because all jokes have this, and I'll show that in a second. But you need to be able to break it down and show, okay, this is what makes this funny. This is the humor. This is the humor behind this particular joke. And we'll do that in a second here. And if there is a solid, that should read, if there is a solid joke there, if there is a solid joke there, then if there's a solid joke there, then there'll be hundreds of ways of framing it, assuming you understand the joke correctly. So when you understand a joke, that means that gives you lots of possibilities. If you understand it, that gives you lots of options. If you're kind of limited to how you read the joke, that probably means you don't really understand it yet. So that's just something to bear in mind. So let's go and analyze this particular joke. Let's identify this joke. I'm going to do this one on my iPad, so I'm going to switch screens here. Pull up my iPad here instead. Here we go. So this is my joke identification chart. just move this down a little bit so you can see what I'm looking at. So, and I've got an example here. So this is just a very quick and brief summary of my theory behind what makes something funny. And I think most jokes can be clearly identified as being the conflict between two things. So thing one on one side, thing two on the other side, and they rub up against one another and they create this conflict, and that's what creates the joke. So for example, an example from a t-shirt design might be something like sloths on one side versus something that doesn't work well with sloths, which is running, and those two run up against one another, and that creates a joke, and that can become a t-shirt design like a sloth running club. Sloth running club. So that's an example of a joke that is the result of running and sloths, which are two things that don't really go together. So when you put them together, it creates this conflict in people's heads. They're like, oh, sloths are slow and sloths are lazy, and running is active and fit and it requires energy. And you put them together and it's like, oh, that's funny because they don't fit together. So that's how jokes come to be. And if we take this example of the gender reveal party, this is kind of what I was doing in my head, and it took me a while to really figure out what was going on. But I think if we do this live, it might make a bit more sense. So, for example, what I came to understand, and it took a while, was that thing one here was, if we put the gender reveal party here. So gender reveal party, and on the other side, that's rubbing up against this this huge forest fire. So this was maybe stage one of kind of identifying the joke. So gender reveal party, which is of course a nice family event, a little kind of insignificant, very personal. It's very personal, intimate family affair, very inoffensive. It's not. We'll find out what it's not in a second. But you're thinking of like pink and blue and cake and candles and whatever. It's a nice little personal, intimate gathering of people. It's a gender reveal party. Okay. On the other side, we've got. This is not funny, but we've got death. We've got destruction. We've got hundreds of acres in flames. We've got firemen having to fight the thing. We got houses going up. We got this huge devastation. Of course, it's not funny, but the joke, of course, is when you rub these two things up against each other, that creates the joke, and that's really where the funny comes from in this whole thing. When you think about, and this is what a lot of the tweets are getting at, and what a lot of the memes are kind of circling around. It's this conflict between these two things, a gender reveal party, which represents one kind of thing, and then a huge forest fire on the other side, which represents another kind of thing. And there's also this kind of other subtext, which was that a gender reveal party, in some ways, people were calling it, I saw lots of tweets of people calling it like selfish and things like that. Now, of course, having a gender reveal party isn't selfish, but it was very careless of people to take pyrotechnics out to the woods and do a gender reveal party, near dry grassland and stuff like that. So people were doing things like that, and people were saying, "Oh, that's selfish. You're being selfish. You were looking after yourself. You weren't thinking of, on the other side, all these people or everyone who's now affected by this huge thing." So, we got the personal versus the collective. You've got selfish individuals versus everything that came from that. So all these things rub up against one another, and that's creates this fertile ground, I could say, for a joke. And that's really how we identify the joke and how we put it together. Now, there's another side to this as well, which if I just quickly undo all this. In fact, let me rub all this out. So there's another side to this, which is, if you recall some of the memes we were looking at, what a lot of the jokes have kind of revolved around and come to focus in on is this what they've done is they've taken the example of the forest fire. So gender reveal on one side. Sorry about my handwriting. I know it's terrible. Gender reveal on one side, rubbing up against this forest fire on the other. And in order to make and kind of illustrate the joke and make it exaggerated and make it funny, what happens is people pick one of these elements and then they kind of zero in on it and then they kind of exaggerate it and they do other examples of that kind of thing. So that's what really happened here with a lot of the memes. We saw things like, like big atomic bombs and stuff, and Terminator 2 and like massive explosions and things like that. And what people were doing was saying, okay, a forest fire is like a really bad natural disaster. And then they were looking for other examples of like natural disasters, or, like atomic bombs, or I don't know, other kind of like, wars or things like this, or planetary destruction. And they just kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it to find bigger examples of terrible things. So if we flick back to the slides for a second, hopefully this is making sense. I'm not losing you. So these kind of jokes here, you can see, we've got atomic bomb. We've got, this was obviously the Terminator 2 explosion, the the robots killing off all humans in the world and stuff like that. So that's what's happened. They've taken this forest fire and looked for examples of similar events of a similar kind of category and just found bigger and bigger versions of it in order to exaggerate it and make it even funnier, to kind of enhance that conflict between the two things. And of course, that plays on the whole thing as well. So that's identifying the joke. We've identified our joke. So we've analyzed our potential trends. I think we've identified the humor. We've kind of begun to understand exactly a little bit about what makes the humor work in this example. And then what we're going to have to do is turn it into an actual t-shirt design. So I'll just take a couple of comments here before we dive into that one. A couple of people picking up on me saying baby incoming. Sue says, hi, Michael. I don't use Twitter. I know I should. How or where do I find the funny stuff? Is there a specific place, person somehow to follow? Sue, you raise a very good point, which is not something I'm going to really be able to get to in this session. But of course, it does matter who you follow and stuff on Twitter. And there are ways of, Twitter does do things like it shows you trends and stuff like that. So you can click through and just look at what's trending. That won't be tweets from people you follow. It will be tweets from across Twitter. So there's things you can do like that. But especially if you're trying, I think for me, this is a good example of kind of what I was saying earlier about how there's trends within communities. Like this kind of trend of making jokes about this is obviously kind of, I saw it on Twitter amongst internet culture, youngish people, those kind of things. So if you're following people that you're interested in or around topics you're interested in, then you should be able to notice trends and things that do happen like this. So I wouldn't necessarily say you need to constantly be on the lookout for any jokes on Twitter or anything like that. I would just say this is what to look for as you're, daily browsing through whatever you're browsing through. I wasn't looking for something that I could create designs around. I was just reading Twitter as I always do. And I think that's the best way to kind of approach it. And the thing is, just as you're reading Twitter, just have that kind of in the back of your mind. Or if you notice, a couple of jokes about the same topic, then that can be a little indicator that maybe there's something going on that you might want to pay attention to. David says you could follow comedians, which is a good idea. Ron says popular sloth in Flash costume design seems to be a current bestseller. That's a good example of a conflict between two things, sloth and the Flash. Put them together, creates a funny joke. Vivian says this chart is so good. Barbara says the absurdity of a gender reveal party is what's funny. If it were a birthday party, there would be no joke. Yes, that's a very good point. This is a conflict because we have something that's deemed unnecessary in many ways. So people are like, why are you doing a gender reveal party? That's so stupid and daft and unnecessary. And a forest fire that was caused as a consequence of that. Sue said, just had a flash in my mind how to make a gender reveal party. So yeah, that could be a playing on the framework that I shared a few weeks ago about doing like instructions. So you could do step one, get the parents. Step 2, get some balloons or something, or pyrotechnics. Step 3, burn down California. That could be a funny joke on that. So we're kind of actually beginning to touch on step 3, turning it into a t-shirt. So let's dive into this one. So number 1, proven t-shirt frameworks exist, so use them. The example that we just gave, how to do such and such. Can you somehow fit that topic into that framework? And this is all the more powerful if you understand the joke, and then you can actually develop it. What frameworks are related to the elements of this joke? So this is kind of my top tip, I think, for today is what t-shirt frameworks, so what t-shirts do people wear that could be somehow related to the elements of the joke. So we just got through looking at those elements. One of the kind of things we honed in on was that forest fires are like a category of a disaster, and therefore we can try and imagine other disasters, and then we can try and imagine t-shirts related to disasters. What might those be like? So I'll give some examples here in a second, but your mind may already be ticking in that direction. Another tip is just to kind of Google it. So if you kind of have some of the elements in place, but you're not really clear, you can, of course, just go and start searching for certain things. So if you say, okay, forest fire is a natural disaster, just go and Google like disaster or disaster t-shirt or something like that and see kind of what happens. A lot of the times I'll do that. I'll start looking into a rabbit hole. I'll go into another rabbit hole. And that's kind of how designs and ideas develop. And when you find something that fits, you want to place your joke into that framework that you found. I'll show that in a second here. So here I've got a joke to framework pattern to follow. So if we talk about thing number 1, so for example, this would be gender reveal party, and then thing number 2, that would be forest fire or disaster of some kind. Put them together and that gives you the joke. And then if you can put that through a t-shirt framework, that gives you a pretty solid idea. So if we do this on the iPad and I switch back, for example, we could take the example that that Sue shared a second ago. So we could say, thing 1, we got our gender reveal party. We've got the forest fire. We put them together, and then we look for a t-shirt framework. We could pick the how-to framework, which is like, you do a kind of how-to. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do that. Step 3, do this. Step 4, do that. Nice, simple design. That gives you an idea. How to host a gender reveal party. And then your last scene could be, burning down California or something like that. So there's a good example of exactly what we mean. And I think I'll give you a couple more just because this is kind of how my brain works through the process. So I can't remember really where I started with the ideas, because once you get an idea, they usually then come thick and fast, because once you kind of crack it, you kind of begin putting things together. So for example, one of the ones that I spotted quite early on, which other people did as well actually, was this thing of like zeroing in on forest fires and then asking, what other kind of t-shirt frameworks could be related to that? What other t-shirt frameworks could be related to forest fires? And the obvious one that came up was only you can prevent forest fires. And of course, we can interpret this and change this around and make this very funny. We can do only you can prevent gender reveal parties. And that was a joke that I think I had the idea. I saw other people had done it as well and come up with it and tweeted it and put it together. So only you can prevent gender reveal parties. I think that's a funny example of where we could go simply by identifying that, we've got an element here that we can do something with. We got a phrase that includes the word forest fire that we can, swap out and create a funny idea around. And then another example is taking this idea of taking the forest fire as a type of something. So forest fire is a type of, type of disaster. I think I started off with with thinking about, okay, what are other big disasters? And I was thinking things like, I don't know, world wars are, good examples of that. And that got me to thinking about, okay, well, you don't really have many T-shirts. You don't really have many T-shirts about world wars. But what you do have around wars is you have things like T-shirts that say, or products that say, I'm a veteran of something or something like that. And so that led me to thinking about, okay, well, you could do some kind of, I'm a gender reveal party veteran, or great gender reveal party 2020 veteran, or thinking about how a veteran is kind of a survivor or something like that. So you could do gender reveal survivor 2020, or I survived the great California gender reveal of 2020. And of course, you can imagine this with appropriate graphics and stuff, but that's a good example of how my brain kind of started putting things together and joining the dots and creating ideas like that. So a couple of other examples, maybe just to hammer the point home. Let me start with a fresh one. Start from fresh. Again, taking this idea of disasters, this was where most of my ideas then kind of flowed from. So things like there was one side of it of like maybe a political side, because obviously people wear a lot of political T-shirts and stuff. So even just very simple things like stop gender reveal parties or something like that, or ban all gender reveal parties 2020, ban all gender reveal parties 2020, and that could be like drawn up like a campaign T-shirt or something like that. And then there was even more kind of a bit more out there kind of ideas, like how you could take the concept of a disaster and thinking about things like massive historical disasters. So things like the wiping out of the dinosaurs, and could you do something about how I don't know, a gender reveal party, killed the dinosaurs, or this idea of pushing the disaster all the way through to like apocalyptic scenes. So we saw a lot of this of where people were doing like big explosions, and it would say it's a boy. So I had the idea of you could do something like, you could do the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Here's Death and all his mates. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse could be riding in on the clouds and stuff like that. And you've got, I don't know, they could be holding up a sign saying, it's a boy, or something like that. Hopefully that's given you a not altogether unwelcome exploration into how my mind works and how it all kind of came together. Let's see here what comments we've got. David says there's tons of them you could do relate to animals. They would make funny shirts for gender reveal parties. Vivian says, how would you title this T-shirt so people can find it? Or do you think people will search for gender reveal party funny T-shirt? So that's a very good question, Vivian. I kind of actually hinted at this in my email earlier this week when I think I included a screenshot actually of so I did give the game away earlier this week. And I tweeted a screenshot of Google Trends, and let me see if I got that screenshot here somewhere. I can't find it, but basically there's a screenshot of Google Trends, and I was searching in Google Trends. I'd put in gender reveal party meme, gender reveal party memes, gender reveal joke, and basically tried a lot of different versions of saying the same kind of thing, and was looking for what was the one with the most searches. So what was the most popular search, and that helps you to kind of figure out, okay, this is the term that people are going to be looking for. So that's a way to help identify what people are going to be searching for. Now, what that doesn't necessarily help you with is, are you going to be able to rank for that above existing gender reveal t-shirts? And there are a lot of gender reveal party t-shirts out there. So people have to be probably looking for something like gender reveal memes or gender reveal joke or something like that. Otherwise, it's it starts to get a bit trickier. So that's an example where this whole idea could fall completely flat. By no means am I saying that this is guaranteed to work or anything like that. We know that this trend may or may not work, but this is just trying to show you exactly how I go through the process of coming up with ideas and jokes, regardless of the trend, regardless of whether it's good or a bad trend or whatever. This is kind of an example of the process I would go through. Ron says it's a boy-girl apocalypse. Walrus says extinction events. Eileen says the disaster they really wanted. They really wanted a boy with explosion image, or Pompeii, says David. Craig says, where a condom prevent forest fires. Yep. Walrus says merch is tricky for some trends, especially if it's linked to a tragedy. What would be the best POD platform for trend-related designs? So it depends on the trend, of course. Walrus, it really depends on that. And of course, if you are, if I guess it just depends. Some will take stuff down, some won't, and it really just depends on whatever it is. I don't think there's a best POD platform for trend-related designs, because trend is such a broad term. But if you're trying to do things that are questionable, then merch is probably not the right platform for that. Redbubble does tend to be more open. Good one, Craig. Coral says Titanic, so that could be an interesting one to link it to, definitely. Andrea says, what about the audience? I've trained myself so well to always think of the audience first. This starts the other way around. Who would be the audience? That's a very good point, Andrea. You're right. We have started with a topic and kind of worked backwards. And I think what I would say is the audience here isn't necessarily something you could pin down into a particular community or niche, because this is a design or a concept or a topic which is a joke, which is not tied to a particular group of people. And it's similar to, for example, I don't know, things like Giant Meteor 2016 or something, which was big at the last election. And, that's a joke. Well, who's that a joke for? Well, I don't know, anyone who finds it funny. The good thing about jokes is they are almost universal as long as you get them. So there isn't necessarily, you don't have to say, oh, this is a joke for 30-year-old women who live in such and such. People do search for, I'm looking for designs about this joke. And then they look at the designs and then they buy them. And it's not necessarily a demographic-based thing. So yes, it's very good to think about the audience. But when it comes to topics like this, which are trending jokes and things like that, there isn't necessarily going to be an obvious audience. But and we know with this one, because we've seen lots of tweets getting very popular, lots of Instagram posts, lots of YouTube things blowing up about it, that this is something that people find funny, and putting something out there could be likely to stick and create some fun around it. So I hope that helps. Andrew also says, okay, so a bit more throwing spaghetti to the wall and see if they stick. Absolutely, that is what the whole thing is about. It's the 80-20 rule. We know a lot of this is not going to work off the bat, but we know that sometimes it does. Sometimes these trends, when you're seeing like the trickles, when you're seeing things begin to happen, that could be an indication that something's going to blow up and be massive. It could also be an indication that something's about to fizzle out and die off. So, it's 50-50, and this is a very, it's nothing like a guaranteed strategy. However, this technique, the framework you see on your screen, that works whether the trend is right or not. That works on any topic, on any subject. That works and will help you create ideas that connect with people. What it doesn't do is tell you whether the trend you picked, whether the subject you picked is actually going to be something that people want to buy. So hope that makes sense. Rusty says, did you do up and post any designs? No, I didn't for this. I've not done any. I just wanted to kind of do the case study and share it with you guys. it's also a pretty current one. So, whether it does work or not, that's for everyone to decide whether they want to pursue it. But hopefully that answers that question. Thingy, revealing your gender in the forest never ends well. That's a good point. So a lot of these are kind of funny little one-liners, which again could be tweets and stuff like that, and doing stuff like that. Philippa, would you remove the design from sale once the trend dies down? No, very rare, unless I had a particular reason to do so. No, Philippa, I wouldn't do that myself. Reza, in your opinion, which news broadcast media can be used as a source of trend research? All of them, Reza. If you think about news is basically trends every day, constantly. That's their job, is to look at something that's new or something that's interesting that's happened somewhere in the world, and they're doing that constantly. So yeah, any news broadcast media should be a source of stories. Now, stories are very different from trends that people go and search and buy things about. So you really would be better looking at, I think, social media is a good place to look at. Twitter, Reddit, Instagram. These are places where it's easier to identify what people are talking about and responding to, and topics that are in the zeitgeist that people are, more than likely to do something about, than looking just on whatever it might be, CNN or something like that. Rusty says this is a great reveal for how to think about trends. No problem. DS Wong says it's not the fire, it's the reveal that caused the disaster. What did they do to cause the sinking? Not really sure what that means, but okay. So that was our kind of process there. And I've just put together this little framework. Again, if you want to get hold of this, you can go to michaelessick.com/live, sign up there, and you'll be taken to a resources page that has all these slides, so you can get a copy of this. But the trend writing framework here, so this is a little flowchart just to help you. So number one, is this a legit trend? So you can go back and look at the questions we asked before to kind of answer yes or no to that. If yes, have you identified a joke within that or related to that trend? If yes, are there existing t-shirt frameworks that somehow relate to those joke elements? And if yes, then simply put them together and you could come up with a funny t-shirt idea. And of course, if the answer to any of these is no, then just move on. There's always another trend. There's always another wave. There's always something else coming down the road that you might be able to apply the same process to. Jennifer says, the gay community and sex change gender reveal funny or too sensitive? Pass. Don't know how to begin to answer that question, Jennifer. I wouldn't know. Coral, hi Michael, is there a way of finding what words are trademarked? For example, Paris Hilton trademarked the words "that's hot." Carol, yes, there is a trademark database registry, especially in the US. So you can search that for trademark terms if you're concerned about stuff like that. Agnieszka, in your experience, is there a market for UK-specific trends, or is it better to focus on the global American trends? There are trends everywhere, in every market, even in tiny little sub-markets. So absolutely, there are UK-specific trends, and there'll be trends in every single country, even in cities. There'll be little trends and stories and stuff. So yeah, hope that helps you there. Walrus, the yes/no decision tree might actually be another t-shirt framework. Yeah, could be a framework in itself. Teresa says, thank you, Michael, for your trend case study. Very insightful. Thank you, Teresa. And Walrus says, Trademarkia is a good resource. So yeah, I think that's somewhere you can go and search for trademarks. Okay, I think that wraps up my presentation. So just round it up here. So yeah, do remember, we don't know if this is something people are going to actually be looking for. The framework still works, but whether we've done a good job of identifying a trend, we only really know when we actually see sales or not. So the trend may or may not land. That's something we don't really control. What we do control is our designs. So we can make sure that we produce the best design because we have understood the joke. We understood the kind of people who are getting this joke and what the humor is. So we can create a good design around that. But of course, your designs also may not work for other reasons, for some reason. So there's a lot of luck involved in here, which I kind of touched at. But sometimes a great t-shirt design can itself become the trend. So this sometimes happens. I mentioned the example of like Giant Meteor 2016. That was a design or a joke. I think it was a bumper sticker at first that became itself a trend. And obviously it was on the back of a wider trend of obviously kind of disassociation, disaffection with the candidates they had for election in 2016. So that's just something to consider as well. If you really create a great joke, that a great design, which is in itself a joke, an original joke. For example, we've had a few people here share, little zingy one-liners about it. Those in and of themselves can actually become like mini trends that people then go and search for directly. Obviously, before the guy did the Giant Meteor 2016 bumper sticker, no one was searching for that. But after he did, it became this big thing on the back of that, and then people went searching, looking for Giant Meteor 16 bumper sticker or whatever it was. Okay. Yeah, so it remains to be seen whether this particular trend hits in the way we might want it to, or I might have expected it to. But I hope the whole kind of frameworks, the layouts, the step-by-steps has really helped you understand how to kind of approach this going forwards. Andrea says we're going to be looking for Japanese trends. Yeah, that might be a good place to start with Merch by Amazon right now. Thanks, Jennifer. Craig says he uses Whippo for trademark checking. Uzdi is saying be careful about that one. Okay, cool. All right. So we are out of time here. So all that remains for me to do is thank you for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed it. I will remind you to go and pick up the slides that you'll find there, michaelessick.com/live. You can download the slides, and that will help you. You can then review these, in your own time and stuff like that. I think what do I need to do? I need to tell you how you can win the book. So if you don't already have a copy of my little book of t-shirt ideas, there it is, then you can win one. I think this is the last week we'll do a little giveaway like this, because I'm giving away far too many books. Last week, if you want to win one of these, all you got to do, tell me in a comment at the end of the live stream. So once the live stream is finished and once the video is on YouTube, you can go and comment underneath the video. Tell me what you got out of this session. What was your best, most favorite tip? What was the thing that you're going to put into practice? And I'll pick a comment at random and I will send them a free copy of the little book of t-shirt ideas next week. So that's how you can pick one of those up. Please do like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you're signed up. I think next week I might actually take a little break from doing a live stream, and I think we might pick it up the week after, because I have some stuff I want to do. All will become clear in the next few weeks. I am working on something that's not unrelated to what we've talked about today, but something that requires a bit of effort and time. And I think if I give myself a bit of a week off, it might allow me to get that stuff done quicker. So I think we'll have a break next week. We'll pick it up the week after. We'll do a live stream the week after. But I will be sending my emails and stuff as usual. So make sure you're signed up at michaelessick.com/live if you're not already, so that you will get my weekly email tips and my roundup emails as well. And I'll just see if there's any more questions I can answer before we close this out. Let's see here. Ron says great stuff as usual. Andrea says thank you, very inspiring. Craig says thank you. Barbara says great. David says thanks. Maura says thanks. Carl says thank you. Walrus says, are you working on a new book? Something like that, Walrus. All will be revealed within the next few weeks, I think, maybe months. Craig says, got mine yesterday. Cool. Craig got his little book of t-shirt ideas yesterday, so that's cool. Rolando, thank you. Gary says, that was great. Thanks. Uzdi says, great. Chota says, thanks. Vivian says, thank you. Eileen says, thank you. Laura says, great. Thanks. And Mutant says, thanks. Sue says, is it a gender reveal? No, not me personally. Not my gender, nor an incoming child's gender. Andrea says, have a good time and lots of success, Michael. Thank you very much. And Stefano says, thank you. Okay, so I think we'll leave it there. Thank you, guys. No live stream next week. Make sure you're signed up to get the emails and stuff. And I will see you again in a couple of weeks' time, but I will be emailing next week. So go and comment beneath the video to win a copy of the book. And I will talk to you all very soon. All right. Thanks for joining me today. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you all guys very soon indeed. All right. Bye-bye.